Hi, and welcome to this tutorial video on designing a custom workstation using Vention's MachineBuilder. Today, we'll be designing towards something similar to what you see on screen over here, however, with a few differences. Now before we get started, it's always good to have an idea of what you're looking to design towards. In our case, obviously it's a workstation, but this does include the dimensions of the structure itself. Once you have this in mind, it's also good to know the load that is going to be applied, as this will dictate what type of extrusion profile you should use for the base structure. If you're not sure what type of profile you should use, you can go to our deflection calculator over here to help with that selection. In our case, I'll be designing using the 45 by 45 millimeter extrusion, as I plan to have a structure with a load of less than 400 pounds. And with that, let's jump over to the design space itself. Now before even adding my first component to the design, it's always good to make sure that you're designing in the 45 millimeter snapping increment, as this will prevent any misalignment later on. Now that I've ensured that, we can get designing. In my case, I like to design the skeleton of the frame first, and after that, add all the frame connectors such as plates and gussets later on. So I'll be designing the backbone or the back frame of my structure. So I'll start by inserting a 45 by 45 millimeter extrusion and placing it vertically. From here, I'll resize it to the approximate height that I'm looking for, which will be about 2 meters tall. Now with this, let's add the bottom bracing, and you'll see the way that I design is usually insert the piece of extrusion and resize it later on, as this is a little faster than selecting it over here and realizing if you need to change it later on to go back and delete it and reinsert a new one. So in my case, let's resize this to be about 1.5 meters wide, and then attach the second vertical member over here. Now to have this, I want to design this to be around an operator height. So what I'll actually be doing is inserting a public model, going into environmental models, and adding one of our 6-foot characters. So in this case, let's place him so he is standing at the same height, and why not, let's spin him around. So now I have a 6-foot operator here that I can design my workstation around. So we're going to add the crossbar at approximately the height that we want an operator to be working at. So let's see over here if he's going to be standing over here with eventually some feet later on. Let's make sure that this cross member is at the appropriate height, which can be around here. So with that, let's finish designing the rest of our skeleton frame. So this guy over here, I can actually select him and press Ctrl H to hide him, and then go back to building out the frame by selecting the 45 by 45 millimeter extrusion. Let's have the table extend out just about 630 millimeters over here. And then what I'm using over here is the letter I to reinsert the last clicked part in my design. In this case, I'll be then reinserting another piece of extrusion, resizing it to what I need, and it's as simple as that. So let's add the vertical member. So what I'm doing is I'm reorienting myself in the design, as the way MachineBuilder works is that it snaps to the location that is visible on screen. I won't be able to attach it to the top of the structure over here because it's not visible to the naked eye. So let's place this one and then resize this down to the bottom. Now you notice as I'm designing this over here, there's a few different ways that I can attach or connect this corner over. Notice that I have the extrusion profile here resting on top, as this is more structurally sound than having the aluminum extrusion simply being held later on in pure friction like this. This is a possible joint, but not an ideal joint connection. So I'll just Ctrl Z to undo those two actions over there, and move on to the rest of my structure. So one thing to note as you're designing workstation, although you might have the top of the frame squared off, it's always important to add the extra bottom bracing to the bottom of the frame to ensure full structural rigidity for yourself. In my case, I added it a little bit recessed from the end, just to allow for the operator's feet to stand in front. Now with that, let's add the aluminum extrusions up top. And then you saw in that original design, I did have some small overhang, so I'll select a slightly smaller extrusion, probably resize this a little bit longer, and finish finish this off over here. Now with this, I have the skeleton of my design, and although it does act as a single entity within MachineBuilder, it will not actually be able to be assembled if I do order this, as there are no frame connectors. So now that I have the base of my frame, let's go ahead and add the plates and gussets. So I'll be starting off by adding plates, as they are more structurally sound to use as a connector than gussets, as there are more points of contact or points of location after assembly. Again, I'm using the letter I to reinsert the last interacted with part, to reinsert the plate over and over and over again. This is a lot faster than designing, say, finding the plate, bringing it back in, reorienting it, and then going finding another plate, as I only have to click one extra letter. In my case, you'll notice the plate does automatically snap to the design in one of the most likely orientations for standard use. If I don't like this orientation, I can use the arrow keys to cycle through the different possible orientations, but usually you'll find it within the first 2 or 3. So let's do off the bottom as well over here. And then finish off with the top for the plates. Again, I will be going back with some gussets, as you did notice I missed the bottom extrusion. So using the letter I, let's reinsert the plate on the side. We're here. Now you notice this connection, I do have this held in friction. However, since this will not be supporting as much of a load as compared to the Workstation bench, I can connect it in this way, as it will be held via the plate. So there still is some additional fasteners as opposed to being held in pure friction. Now that we have this, we're going to go through the rest of the structure and add gussets where appropriate. Obviously for this member down here that is not a load-bearing member, using a gusset to simply attach it is fully appropriate and acceptable to square the structure off. Additional places that you can add gussets are in the corners like this, as it does add to the structural rigidity, but makes it easier for assembly, as well as squaring the structure off. Up here, it is also possible, but not entirely necessary. Now with that, my structure is more or less complete as far as the skeleton goes. However, there are some additional things that I am missing. Now, first off would be the panel that will act as the work surface. However, prior to doing this, I do have to think of the load that will be applied to it. If it's going to be an evenly distributed load, having a blank space in the middle can function. However, if it's not going to be an evenly distributed load, it's recommended to add additional bracing. So add a couple members over here as additional bracing. Let's say add 3 of them across the end, and then attach them with gussets. So this will act as additional support underneath the panel, which acts as the work surface for the station. So placing each of these in the corner. Now we can go ahead and create the panel itself. Before doing this, it's always recommended to click the Check Connections button, as this is required for the panels to be properly generated. What this does is it scans through your design to ensure that all available connections, so for example, this extrusion next to this one, are actually connected within the 3D space. So to generate a panel, what you will do is hold Control and select all of the extrusions that the panel will be resting on or come in contact with. You can neglect these top 2 over here, as it's primarily resting on these 4. With that, I will go to right click and select Create Panel. Over here, normally for work surfaces, we go with the Poly Eco HDPE panel, and we can automatically generate countersinks holes to allow us to fasten this to your structure. With that, I'll press Apply to generate the panel. What this is doing in this loading is actually analyzing the 3D geometry of the workstation itself and placing the holes at the appropriate spacing to ensure that the panel can be connected properly. So you'll notice if I zoom in, you have the countersink fastener locations already pre-drilled into the panel, as well as the cutouts around the extrusions in the corners. Now from here, we can just go ahead and add the final touches to this, which will first be the wheels at the bottom to make this a mobile workstation. So go over to the parts, select the wheels, wheel mounting plates. Wheel mounting plates are not 100% necessary to attach wheels. However, they do assist greatly and make the structure a little bit more sound during assembly. So we'll add 4 of these, 1 at each corner. And then finally select the wheels. In our case, this is going to be a mobile workstation, so let's add 2 standard swivel casters at the back, and then 2 lockable swivel casters at the front. This will allow the operator to actually lock the workstation in place after it's found its home and the workstation. Now from here, let's bring my operator back into view by pressing Ctrl-Shift-H and just make sure that I have properly designed this workstation around this operator. So looking here, let's bring it down to the same height as the workstation itself. And seeing here, the workstation is approximately waist height, which does function as a operable height for a workstation. If you're looking to add a couple extra features, it's always good to say, for example, add some additional aluminum extrusion bracing in the center, so you can add parts to hold buckets, den rails, or some form of power tool as well. So let's add them over here, and then finally add the gussets. So now, there is one final thing that you really should do before, say, checking out your design, which would be to go through a design validation step. So there are 2 ways to do this. First is to request a design review that will send the design off to a Vention representative, or second is to click the automated design checker over here. What this will do is it scans through your design and double checks to make sure that everything is in order. In my case, it's found 2 errors, so let's see what they are. First, we have a floating part. In this case, it's our 6-foot and 6-foot character over here. So for this one, I could dismiss it. And the second, it's noticing that I am missing some end caps. If I actually zoom in on my design, I actually am missing some end caps over here. So I can go back to my parts, frame accessories, and add those. It's always recommended to add end caps at any open extrusion ends for safety and also aesthetics as well. Now scanning through the rest of my design, it does look like everything is in order. So my workstation is good to go. And with that, that completes the tutorial on designing a basic workstation using Vention MachineBuilder. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.